teach my clients, I teach my students, I teach on the podcast that your community has to come first, and you can build a viable brand with a revenue stream, multiple revenue streams, without 1 million followers and without $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do it organically by starting with your community.
You're back, and it is episode 3 of season 3. That's where we are.
I can't believe that. It feels like this was just a twinkle in our eye 5 minutes ago.
Kind of, because it was. And we just were like, let's go. We're recording season 3.
There's something about calling it seasons, though, that feels like, wow, a lot of time has passed.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I've really loved having some of these like topic focuses.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it, I love to ask questions.
Right.
And it's just fun to be able to like guide those questions and that curiosity in a specific direction. The season, It's of course community.
And it's community this season. And everyone, welcome to No Surprises, a look inside the ambitious, joyful, and occasionally terrifying journey of creators. Like Kelsey said, this season we've been talking about community, and so we've been inviting some friends as guests and guests that become new friends to talk about how they find community in their work or how they've built their own communities. And we have someone who is kind of the expert in community building.
Yes.
Given all their experience.
Yes. Today we have the fabulous Lindsey Pinchuk. We got a chance to meet Lindsay when we were on her podcast, Dear FoundHer, and it was a fabulous experience. But before we fully introduce you, I'm going to give you a little background. So Lindsey Pinchuk of Lindsey Pinchuk Marketing Consulting is a phenomenal community builder with nearly 25 years of marketing and sales experience behind her. She is an award-winning entrepreneur, a consultant, a community builder, a connector, a storyteller, an expert marketer, social media maven, spokesperson, on-air expert, small business champion, and of course, an amazing mom.
Let's hear it for that list. Let's hear it for that list.
It's a great list. She's also the host of Dear FoundHer podcast, a weekly letter to female entrepreneurs to inspire, motivate, and provide actionable tips for success through thought-provoking conversations with some of the most successful founders and entrepreneurs who have paved the way. Lindsay, welcome to No Surprises.
Welcome. It's so great to be here. I love hanging out with you guys. I could talk to you all day.
I know. We had the best time last time. If I recall, we went well over our recorded schedule.
It was a very long episode, but it was a great episode.
I am just sad that we don't have the pan flute player outside the window again today. When we recorded with Mal was in Mexico City, and at one point we were just like, what the heck is that sound? And Mallory's
they
like,
were playing
sorry.
Miley Cyrus Flowers, I believe. As that
Miley
was
Cyrus on the pan flute.
When I was editing, like I take the first pass before I send it to my producer. I was crying. I was laughing so hard because I was looking at my face and your face, Kels, and I was like this is so funny. Like it was watching the whole interaction after the fact was also amazing.
I really like when things happen that will like probably never happen again and you could never have planned. Like I think those moments are just like, I treasure them because the absurdity of the moment is just like, this is life,
Right.
When people are like, do we live in a simulation? I'm like, I don't know. That's a really specific plot point in the game.
Yeah.
If that's the case, like that, that's really specific.
My favorite's when it would be like the clown circus music and I'd be like, yes, this is life. This is correct.
Well, I was looking around and I thought there was an ice cream truck outside my house. And I was like, why is there an ice cream truck at 10 a.m. outside my house? And like, shut up. And I'm like in the suburbs. I'm like, I'm
right.
Like,
yeah.
You're like, I know this sound.
Well, it's so special to have you because I feel like community is so hot right now, right? But there are people for whom community has been the core of their work forever, right? So we talked a little bit in our pre-tape conversation about your experience back in the day in ad sales, but you have an amazing background of community building in your previous work and now. So I would love, by way of, introducing our listeners to you, for you to tell us a little bit about how you got here today from the lens of building community. What does that mean to you, and how did that filter through your work leading up till today?
So it's funny because I don't think I realized it at the time, but now I have a process for building community that, I teach and I work on with clients, but it really took me looking back at my experience and saying, oh, I was successful because I built community and this is how I did it, to realize that that's what I am really good at. So a little bit of background, I started a company called Bump Club and Beyond, which when I first started, it was called Bump Club Chicago. And the whole point of me starting this company was to build a community for myself of expectant moms and moms when I was expecting my first daughter, who I'm actually planning her bat mitzvah. So that was a long time ago. 13 years. I know.
Yes, the most fun.
Really crazy. But at the time I was not intending to start a business. I was a transplant to Chicago and none of my friends were pregnant. We all have kids going into 7th grade. Mine was just born first.
Yeah.
And I said, I need to find a community of like-minded moms, women who work, women who are going to go back to work, women who live in the city and who are dealing with all of these transitions at the same time as me. No one cared about my fat ankles. No one cared about my itchy stomach. And it was really nice when I started hosting these events that I could go once a week and talk about being pregnant with people who just got it. And so that's how Bump Club started. Like, I started hosting events. It was dinners, workouts, shopping events, really all with the premise of being pregnant. And I showed up at the events online. There was no social media at the time. So it was like on my website and whatnot, sharing these trials and tribulations and ups and downs of being pregnant. And because I was so honest and forthcoming and me, and like really and truly, I don't give a shit. Like, I don't, like, there was no filter, that no one was an influencer at the time. I just really showed up and was like, I feel so gross. Do you? And like, people were like, yes,
have you had this pain?
So really through that lens that people started coming to my events. They started asking me for advice. They started asking me for what products I was buying. And so from there, I cultivated this business that became like the place to go if you were looking to connect with products, information, resources, and other expectant, and then eventually new parents, because we'd started doing things for parents too. So the community came first. It was not a business first. I was not monetizing it. But what ended up happening was hundreds, thousands, and then eventually millions of people really subscribed to what we were doing at Bump Club because it just started with real people.
Yeah, there was a lot of authenticity.
Yes. And like, it wasn't even it wasn't until like, I don't know, a few months in that I started charging for events. And then eventually I had brands say to me, well, can we sponsor them? We want to reach these people. And so, but even with that work, I never took money from a brand because I didn't want to compromise my trust with my community. The community always came first. It was always me and like being my true authentic self. It was always the community and what did they need from me? And I asked them, like, after every event, after anything that we did online, they received a survey and ultimately they dictated what happened moving forward. I will give you an example of that. I sent out a survey. We used to have these dinners at Wildfire. I mean, everyone loves Wildfire.
Wildfire. They got some great potatoes.
Salad.
Yes, but expectant moms didn't like Wildfire. And I didn't know until I asked them. And the feedback we got was, there are so many aversions to chicken, which I didn't have one when I was pregnant, but so many women don't like chicken when they're pregnant. And that's what we served. We served chicken, pasta, and like the chopped salad. And people were like, can we get another option? And so it was that feedback that the community told me that led us to go to food, where there's food stations and everyone got to pick their own meal. So it's just, I share that because it's so important that you cultivate the community around your brand, no matter what you are doing. my business was a community. So, but every brand should have a community that they look to for that kind of feedback. And eventually I grew this business. We started hosting events in 30 cities across the country. We were working with Nordstrom and Target on activations to bring our community into their stores for various registry situations and baby events. We were working with brands like Unilever. We were working with brands like The Honest Company, who everyone wanted a piece of our community because it was so engaged, so strong. And I will say that has carried on to now. I mean, fast forward, I built this company, I sold it. Essentially, I sold it in 2019. I worked for the new company for a couple of years. And a big part of why I left is because to them, the P&L came first and the community came second. And my face was on this brand and it no longer was aligning with my values, with my mission. I was being compromised essentially for a big corporation's P&L. And I didn't want my face to be associated with that. And so that is why I left. And when I left, I did so to start over again and to build a community of female founders. I went through a lot, building, growing, scaling, selling, and then working for this new company. And I wanted to support other women in business who were looking to build their own brands, whether they were looking to sell or not. But, my own experience lends a lot of lessons to other female founders. And so now I have a community. It's more online at the moment. I am hosting some events coming up though later this fall.
We're getting in person again.
Because I do think that there's something to be said about in person and community building. But we couldn't.
We got forced into the virtual format. I think a lot of people, especially for events like this, would prefer in person. You get forced there, and then we're all like adopting it because we have to. But now everyone's like, let me out. I want to see people in person again.
Well, but the interesting thing is it, like I said at the top of me explaining what I do, when I look back on what I did with Book Club and how I made this successful, I have taken all of these lessons and packaged them up into this philosophy of marketing that is cost effective and community centric. And that is what I teach. And I teach my clients, I teach my students, I teach on the podcast that your community has to come first, and you can build a viable brand with a revenue stream, multiple revenue streams, without 1 million followers and without $1 million. And you can do it organically by starting with your community. And, once you have people that subscribe to you and trust you, those are the people who eventually are going to buy from you. So your community and the way you cultivate it, that's your bridge to eventual transaction. Does it take a little bit of extra time? Sure. But I think that in the long run, it is more successful than throwing a bunch of ad dollars into, direct to consumer, Facebook, Instagram ads to get someone to purchase, because that's like a flash in the pan. Right.
Well, and in that work too, you're looking at a lot of numbers, and that's fine. Numbers tell a story that you can't deny. However, they're not getting that like more nuanced sort of connection that you get directly with a person. Like to your point, when you said, oh, well, like no one wanted chicken. And I just, but then you saw that and you're like, no, we serve our community first and foremost.
And I do think I would just want to add, I do think that it's important for every brand to have a community, whether you're like a product or a service, whatever it is. But I do think that like for you guys and for me as service-based companies, having a community is the utmost importance when it comes to your marketing strategy, because to your point, people want to buy from people, and that should be your number one priority when you're building a brand.
So one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about lately is identifying the correct community, right, for you. Because if we looked at where you were when you started Bump Club, that was like a very specific experience you were going through. And then you found this community of people who could connect with you on a lot of topics. When you're working with your clients, I'm guessing there's a lot of times where they come to you and say, my community is X, but you can look at them and go, well, that might be true, but actually your community is this different group of people that you're not identifying. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I think that like, we're a really interesting example where our community is probably a little bit different than what our client is as an agency and as a service provider. So like, can we talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's just one of those interesting parts of this process.
Yes, I think like I always tell my clients when we're getting started in terms of identifying who we're going to talk to, always say you have to meet your community where they are, right? And so like, it's not just, to your point, people think they know who they're going to talk to, right? Yeah. But doesn't always happen that way. So I always say to my clients, you need to figure out what media they consume, where are they shopping, what celebrities do they like, where do they live? Sometimes it's geographic, sometimes it's not. You really have to dig deep into all of these different things, because that's how you talk to them. And I'm gonna give you a more practical example. I was pitching a business the other day, and the product is it's like a homeopathic product for pain. Okay. And he thought that his community was like totally like racket sport users. Okay. And to a degree, yes. And I do think to a degree, his clients are that person. But when we're talking to the community and we're creating content for the community online, it's not just racket sport users that have pain. I said to him, well, there are many women who are 45, 50 plus who are having pain, and we can look at them and talk to them in terms of menopause, and we can talk to them. There are so many different layers that we can actually factor in that they might not play any racket sports. So
that's interesting.
So I think it's really looking at like not just your end user, but what's the pain point that you solve, and who else needs to be helped with this solving of the pain, right? Because at the end of the day, like I create my content for female founders. That's who I create my content for. But I don't only talk to female founders. I do talk to business owners who are not female. I talk to women in business who might not own their own businesses, but a lot of these principles can be solved. So it's the pain points that I talk about and address. And ultimately what happens is I might be talking to female founders, but because I'm addressing pain points, it trickles down into other demographics, other people who eventually are part of my community.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's so interesting to like help people broaden that perspective of who they can communicate with. Talking a little bit about like meeting your community, it occurs to me that you may be kind of catching up with a lot of the people who started in community with you in Bump Club. They went through their pregnancy, they had their kids because of the group that you were kind of targeting, that mindset and that community. Do you feel like there's overlap now of people who are like, okay, I've had my kids, I'm getting back into my professional career, and now I'm ready to found something. I'm ready to start something new. I love that arc. That's got to be such a cool feeling to be like, I didn't have to leave this behind. I was able to continue with it.
It 100% is. And it's not something that happened like on purpose, right? Like it's part of the life stage. And I would say my biggest customer demographic is, like who actually like buy my services is women over 40. And it's, women who are going back to work. It's women who are trying to start side hustles. And so many of those connections that I had at Bump Club have moved over with me. And, it's Club was a really special community. Okay. Yeah. Like I can't even, there are not words to really express what occurred at Bump Club. If you look on any of my posts where I talk about Bump Club, you can kind of see the gist from people who comment. It's a really pivotal time in your life when you're having a baby. It's a really special time in your life. And the people that came together during these times, like I see women on girls trips as groups with people that they met and formed groups with at Bump Club, because there is just something about that time of your life, right? And so like that community, but I think this goes for any community. If you have a community who really is engaged with you and who believes in you, they are going to follow you. And that community stuck by me even when I left. A lot of them followed me over to my own Instagram. They followed me over to LinkedIn. They refer me to people now for business because they know me and they trust me and they like me from the 13 years that I was giving them,
right. 13 years of trust building right there. Boom. Everyone.
And me now for this part too. And so that is why it's so important to cultivate this community of trust, no matter what your brand is, because when you do move and shift and change, which we all do, they will come with you, they will support you, they will help you, and they will help carry you. And really and truly, all these women want is to see me succeed, because I've helped them in so many ways and I want to see them succeed. So, it's, if I could help them in this new 2.0 of mine, that's great. And then, I mean, an aside from what you just mentioned, Kelsey, is so many of my contacts from Bump Club have like been on my podcast, or like, you know what I mean? Like, that's where I started. Like Dana Gordon was my first guest from Dana Rebecca Designs on Dear FoundHer. And she is someone I met at Bump Club. Like she came to a Bump Club event on her own. Like she signed up and paid for it. We had mutual friends. Someone introduced us, and we have continuously been friends since. We have continuously supported one another since, and she was my first guest. So like, it's just, there's so many layers, right?
There is. It really does. I mean, it's wild to me because community is something that I feel like is so integral to who we are as human beings, and especially women, right? We come at it from a perspective of like I think about when my friends would say like, group parenting. Like when one of my friends told me, just so you know, when I have a baby, you feel free to scold it. Like if the baby's acting up, hop in there, group parenting. And I'm like, yes, because it's like those shared experiences, they bring you all together. And you've been doing it for so long that you have actually seen how that timeline moves with you. And it's really, really cool because it's something that we need. And like you're saying, like Bump Club's really special. And it came about in a time where we really needed that. And that wasn't happening yet.
You just said something that you said about like shared experiences. That is a big part of this 2.0 of mine in Dear FoundHer, is to get people to share their experiences, both on the podcast, on our social media, at live events, on Zooms, whatever. The whole thing that with Bump Club was, there were a lot of shared experiences. We talked really honestly about motherhood, but now we are talking very honestly about entrepreneurship and owning businesses. And there is so much garbage and shit out there, and people like blowing smoke and saying that things are great and when they're not. And you really need to share these experiences of failures, of not things being rainbows and unicorns all the time, is like what I like to say. And we're doing this again. And I do find like anytime I share something that is like not something that happened positively, I get so many people that come out and say, oh my God, thank you for sharing that. And it just really goes to show, similar to when you're pregnant and something doesn't go as planned, that's like something that's translatable, right? Like it's like in terms of building community. You can't just stand on your high horse and preach. You have to be a part of the community too, as the person who's, and that's why I started Dear FoundHer. Like I wanted to share the shitty stories.
Yeah. It's so important. I have a fun little aside that goes in with this that has to do with this exact topic. I've always been the type of person who's an open book. And people always like to say, woo, when you show up on Instagram or in public space, I'm like, no, I'm 100% me. You're going to get the truth. And when I closed down my first business, I did an interview with Cranes. And it was right when a lot of retail shops were shuttering. And the reason is because the economy was in the shitter. Like, this is just really bad. But this was a time, so this was back in around like 2014, 13, 14. And it was at a time when people weren't really that open about sharing these experiences. And so when I sat down with Cranes and I was giving it to them, and I was like, well, this happened, and then this happened. And then I was like, do I even want to do this anymore? And I remember the person who interviewed me being like, I can't believe how candidly you shared all of this information, because it was already a hard topic. Like, I was talking about shutting down a business, and I didn't, like, at that point I knew and had mentioned, like, I'm starting a production and marketing ish. We didn't know what we were at the time. It was really early agency with my friend Kelsey. But that article, I had so many people coming up to me and talking to me about that. They're like, I can't believe that you're going to share. I was like, yeah, I mean, it is not all unicorns and rainbows in the retail world. It is a hustle. It is. And I still talk to friends I've made in that industry where I was like, that is a grind. That is like, when I talk about managing the finances for Week of the Website versus that, I'm like, that still took the cake. It was like unbelievable what you do in retail. And it just is like, people want to hear that. Like, there's no shame about failing. That's the only way you learn. If you're in a yes room and an echo chamber and everything's going great, you're not getting better, and you're not actually providing a service or a solution for what you're doing. You're just thinking that something's going to hit, and it doesn't, because it just doesn't resonate with people the same way. People, it's not that they want to embrace
There's nothing
anything
to be
bad that
embarrassed
happened.
about. There's
Yeah,
also
there's
to be embarrassed about if you are not doing as well as you think you're doing. And truthfully, if you talk about it and share about it, you might end up getting the help that you need before you have to do something like shut down your
100%.
business.
Yeah.
And like,
It's
when I was selling my business, I was not in a great place financially. I was actually not paying myself. I'm very forthcoming about that. It was like, I was like, I need to just sell this business because I just cannot like bootstrap anymore. And at the same time, it was a woman in my town who I was friendly with, who had her own business as well. And, you know, she was getting so much press. And I was like, how is she in like the Wall Street Journal? How is she in like New York Times? Like, how is she in all these publications? She's been in business for like 5 minutes, right?
She know people?
Yeah, I'm guessing yes, but like, you know, but like I also knew people, and I had been in business for 10 years at that point. And, you know, you would have looked at this business and thought that it was going swimmingly. And a week before I sold my business, she closed hers. And but no one knew that she was struggling, but like she's never come out and said I had this struggle or whatever it was. But like I think about that all the time, because what if she had said something to me, or like, I'm really going through a lot right now, and like maybe I could have with some help. You know, you don't have to make people think that you're just the end all and be all and you're doing so well if you're
Right.
And like, it's okay to admit to not being on top of your game, or not being on top of the world, or whatever it might be. And so I think that when I do that, both in both parts of my career, when I have done that, that's why people trust me.
Well, it feels like perfection and that veneer doesn't let anyone in, right? Like, if you have this super smooth exterior, there's nothing for people to hold on to. Imperfection adds texture. It gives something people to connect to. I struggle with this because it's like, I definitely struggle with that sense of like, it's never going to be like, I have to be good enough I have to be 100 times better than anyone thinks I am, just to prove that I'm halfway as good as I want to be. And like, that is so hard to shake yourself of, is that sense of like, I have to present this way. We're coming up on a 1-year anniversary of Mallory and I sitting in Wicker Park, very close to her birthday, being like, we gotta make it work, or we gotta figure out what comes next. And so I feel like she and I have both been walking that line of like, really
and speaking
trying to
of not getting paid, that's exactly what was happening for like 2 years, where we were making $30,000 each. And it was not okay.
Yeah.
It is not okay. And we just recently started paying ourselves again. We are a 9-year-old company. Like, these things, like, it wasn't always this way. We're making money before, but it's just like, man, like
Probably
when
as you grew and as you were paying more people, you had to pay the people before you were paying yourself, and you were trying to meet customer demand, and you had to figure out a system that worked for you and for your freelancers and your contractors. I mean, and for
our
your business.
overhead shot up. We were like, what are we going to do here? Well, we can dig ourselves into debt, or we can just maybe not pay ourselves. And like, here we are, like wiping like savings accounts to like pay rent. And people don't talk about that enough, where I'm like, being an entrepreneur, when I see entrepreneurs who are like, I make 6 figures, I'm always like, no, you don't. Like,
You might
you're
bring
talking
that
about
in.
it. No, you don't.
I do think that that's something that like has been challenging for me, watching this like growth. And I'm sure you've experienced this too, Lindsay, where like there's a cottage industry and people who are like, make X number of figures doing blank. And it's like that, it's such a treadmill, because you realize like the minute that you start making a certain amount, you're also providing service at a certain level. And it's a marathon. Like the whole thing is a marathon. So I know we're coming to the end of our time. We want to be really intentional about your schedule, but I want to hear from you. Like, what's the dream future for your current, for your Dear Founder community? A year from now, where do you want to be? What are we going to be talking about on your return visit podcast episode?
So, I mean, I hope so. So with Dear FoundHer, it's funny because when I left Bump Club, I was like, oh, I never have to do events again. You know what I mean? And I said at the top of this, like, here I am, like wanting to do events again. And so I'm actually this fall, I'm kind of dabbling in a little bit of the event arena, nothing crazy, no big productions. I'm literally hosting 3 networking events on the North Shore of Chicago with 3 female founded businesses.
Love it.
And everyone's invited. It's going to be an RSVP, totally free. Grab your coffee or your lunch at this venue and join us. And we're going to workshop. We're going to network. There will be some. Really, I want to see how people react to this, what they want from it. And I also want to be able to use this as research to what I want to do next. I said also I'm planning a bat mitzvah. That's a really big event that I'm planning at the moment. And so to go out and find sponsors for an event, I just this year I realized was not the year. So I would like to use these 3 events. And next year I would like to take this on the road and potentially do events in multiple cities, and really bring women together, not just online, but in person as well. I know there is something to be said about an in-person connection. People love it. People gain from it. Last summer, I hosted an accidental event with another female founder. It was like nothing we had like intended to do. And I ended up interviewing 5 women who had been on my podcast at this like restaurant venue, and almost 100 people came. People are still telling me, oh my God, I met so-and-so and so-and-so, and we've done this together. And that's what I want. Like, I want to do what I did for Bump Club for founders, really and truly, like ages 30 to 50. That's the sweet spot. Bringing people together and really building the podcast into more of a community and having it drive its own P&L. Right now, that doesn't. Right now, the podcast fuels my consulting business and I get tons of clients from it, and that's great. But I would eventually like to be in a place where the podcast is, a media company, and I'm giving information and I'm bringing community.
I see this for you. Yeah.
I see it too. It's so clear.
So I hope so.
Well, we're really grateful and thrilled to be a part of your community. Of course, if Team Week of the website can ever be a part of any of that, just give us a shout. We're here.
Of course, obviously. Obviously. And I'm so grateful to be a part of your community too. I am so, so grateful. Shout out to Rachel Rochelle for connecting us.
Yes. Yeah.
Because
Rachel.
She's the best. She's like the ultimate connector. But I love having you guys in my world, and I know
too.
This is not it. So I know that there's more to come.
Amazing.
Well, thank you, Lindsay. You're a dream guest to have on these podcasts. But we'll include more about Lindsay and what she's up to in our show notes. You can subscribe to No Surprises where you get your podcasts. You can also watch this delightfulness on YouTube. Our website is weekofthewebsite.com, and you can find us on Instagram at weekofthewebsite. And we will be back next week with even more no surprises, even less surprises, they might say.
Even decreasingly
Even
fewer
less.
surprises every episode.
Yeah.